I don't know about the lack of British identity or whatever, but what I do think creates a hostile environment for trans people, and why so many younger people particularly may suffer with gender dysphoria, is because of the climate of which they live in, where you have political, media and public figures demonising them. I think the conversation very often about trans people descends immediately into the gutter and removes the dignity and justice that these people deserve. Just like us, trans people want and deserve housing, education, jobs, opportunities, but so often are they derided in debates as being deviant, as being wrong in some way and not supported. I think the number...
Well, hang on, some of these fellas that go around dressed as women with their, their fake bits in their bras, they are deviants, quite frankly.
I don't know who you're referring to. What I will say there, Jolly, is I think that you can't on one hand say, come out against the derision of trans people and then continue to refer to them as being mentally ill.
That's not an insult. That's a statement of fact. But what about,
we have people in the media literally making up hypothetical situations for which to demonise trans people with. What if someone does this? What if someone does that? And, it often comes into the conversation of protecting...
Who sits there and goes, what if someone does this?
When we talk about, the changing rooms debate is a perfect example of this.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the channel. So I wanted to react to a GB News debate that happened in the height of where we had nurses being told that they weren't entitled to their own changing rooms, that men were allowed to undress in front of them in their changing rooms. We had nurses being suspended for misgendering male predators on the ward. All of these things were happening in the UK after the Supreme Court ruling, may I add. So I have a couple of updates on one of those stories in particular. But this debate starts off very interestingly. So we have one of the presenters, he looks like he's Gen Z. He's speaking about how we got here. That perhaps we've appeased certain people and we've co-signed certain mental health conditions and tried to normalize them. And that may be why we're here now.
Behaved as if individual self-expression is the most important possible thing. The idea that you can't judge people and so forth, and that your own identity, self-defined identity, is the most important thing. But what I think that does to people is it makes them a little bit loopy. It is an expression of mental illness, because what else can it be? If you are born a male and you are biologically a male, then you can't. It's physically and spiritually impossible to become a female, right? And so, in the same way that you wouldn't tell a schizophrenic that there are men in dark suits following them around, and that there are bugs in their home and cameras in their walls and so on, you don't tell a male who believes he's a female that he is a female. That doesn't have that person's best interests at heart. What you're doing is you are buying into, supporting, and enabling their delusion, which I think is why you see so much what you've just said about self-harm, suicide, and so on. I don't think you help these people by.
So he speaks about that, and I find that very interesting. And then we have another member on the panel who is just repeating so many talking points that we've all heard. Certain mantras. You have to believe men can be women. This is historical. It's been happening from ancient times, apparently, this sort of thing.
But trans people have always existed. Look, historically, back through, go back as far as ancient Greece, ancient Rome, whereas obviously there's not so much the surgical sort of changes people can have these days. Gender dysphoria has long existed. It's in, as I said, mythology. It's in Shakespeare's plays. It's through literature.
But I think it gets to the point where the presenter, Michelle Dewberry, she's just had enough, because he begins to imply that when women talk about being put in unsafe situations, in the locker room, in the bathrooms, in showers, their changing rooms at work, that this is just scenarios.
But what about,
we have people in the media literally making up hypothetical situations for which to demonise trans people with. What if someone does this? What if someone does that? And, it often comes into the conversation of protecting...
Who sits there and goes, what if someone does this?
When we talk about, the changing rooms debate is a perfect example of this. The conversation around...
Why should I, as a female, be forced to get changed in front of a male?
Because then this is, again, the conversation about where you view gender and somebody's right to self-autonomy.
I've got no interest in how someone views their own gender. My question was, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a male?
So this is when he starts to repeat mantras, trans women are women. So if they're women, that means there's no restrictions between men who identify as women and real women. That there shouldn't be any restrictions between the two, no boundaries. Men who believe they are women should be free to go about as they please in women's changing rooms, in women's private spaces, in women's sports. No doubt he believes that, because he believes that men can be women. And she's trying to get him to understand that there are consequences when you go along with that sort of thing. And you try to get everybody else to go along with it. There are consequences, real life consequences, not just scenarios, made up hypothetical situations. It's happening right now. It's affecting the lives of women. Nurses have had to go to court just to get their employer to give them their own private changing spaces. But he's going along in his own world, repeating certain mantras and not thinking of the consequences.
But if we're referring to a trans woman, then that is a woman.
No, a trans woman is a biological male. So I'm asking you again, why should I, as a female, be forced to get undressed in front of a biological male?
Right, but if somebody has a gender,
Answer
for
that
example...
question.
Well, nobody's making you do that.
Yes,
Michelle.
you do. There's cases going through the courts at the moment. I can think of one such case in the NHS where some nurses are taking action because they were forced to share a changing room with a gender-neutral changing room where there was what you call a trans woman, i.e. a biological male, using those facilities.
This is somebody who has not been paying attention because he is looking through the lens of whatever he's been exposed to through the media, on social media. He's only listening to one side. He believes he has the moral high ground. He believes it's the kind thing to do, to accept men as women. He believes that anybody who doesn't do that is just a bigot. And is just making up scenarios just to infringe upon the rights of trans people. This is what he believes. And I've heard this repeatedly. This is what Laverne Cox was saying the other day. I did a video about it just yesterday. He said that it's not about women's rights. It's not about protecting women. It's just about infringing upon the rights of trans people. It's not wanting trans people to be great.
It's clear that it's never been about sports. It's never been about protecting women or children. If they wanted to protect women and children, they would indict the people in the Epstein files. We know who they are, but they're not doing that. So that was all a pretext to scapegoat trans people, to dehumanize us and put us in an excluded category so that they can take away our rights.
So they are not thinking about the consequences. This is a man telling a woman, a real woman, that she has to be okay with men in her spaces. Because what? Trans women are women. And that's all he's got, is repeating a religious mantra to justify putting women in harm's way. He thinks that when we talk about men with fetishes, predators, being given access to women's spaces, he thinks that that's a separate situation. He doesn't connect the dots. I don't know if he's being disingenuous. I don't know if he's just severely brainwashed, or if he's being malicious and just playing dumb, which a lot of these activists seem to do. In his case, I'll give him the benefit of the doubt. He's just clueless.
So yeah, it actually does happen.
Right.
So I ask you again, why should I, as a biological female, be forced to share and get undressed in front of a biological male?
No, I will say trans men are men, trans women are women. That is my opinion, and I think that we need to respect...
So we haven't answered it. So basically what you're saying is I, as a biological female, have to get changed in front of some fella because you say the label is...
That transgender people are... Do you think that trans people exist? I
think that what you call a transgender woman absolutely exists. I don't think it's a figment of your imagination, but I think that they're categorically, biologically male.
And of course he's resorting to what Laverne Cox resorted to, pulling out the G word. You don't want them to exist. You want them eradicated. This is what they resort to. All this hyperbole. To be fair, he didn't mention the G word, but to imply, you don't want them to exist, while simultaneously advocating for women to be erased, because you deny the definition of a woman, and that directly impacts upon the rights of women.
So therefore, they cannot and should not be able to access female-only spaces. Lots of women like me do not want to have to get dressed and all the rest of it in front of biological men. This is not a controversial view. We have single-sex spaces for a reason. We have an epidemic of male violence against women and girls. We fought hard to get our single-sex spaces. We deserve those single-sex spaces. Those single-sex spaces are often responsible for keeping us safe. And many of us, and there's women that will disagree with me, and I respect that, but many of us do not want biological men in our spaces, our private single-sex spaces, and nor should we have to have them there just in order to satisfy other people's descriptions.
Right, well, I suppose we're going to have to agree to disagree there, Michelle. But what
but we always...
He's got nothing to say. No comeback. How can you come back from that? She destroyed him. All he could do was listen, finally. And the other member on the panel, let her just go for it. Because I'm sure he's got some intelligent arguments as well. Because he was speaking truth during this whole segment as well.
This narrative that you're kind of building here, that trans people are somehow uniquely beset upon by society at large, I don't think is true. Because I think if you go into any of the kind of institutions of power in our society, whether that is the government itself or the civil service or an Amazon HR department or a media company or anything else, and you listed off the opinions that you've just given, you would find almost unanimous approval. Because like the climate and nature thing, the trans thing is also an elite project. It's something that has been picked up by power and centred in the mainstream consciousness, despite the fact that this is a tiny, vanishingly small minority of people.
But this guy, who she's setting straight, had nothing to say. And I don't know if it's just that he never even considered how it affects the women. He never even considered it. There are people who aren't necessarily malicious in their approach to this sort of topic, but they are completely clueless and they don't take the time to listen to women. They automatically put up a barrier and say, well, you must be a bigot. You don't want them to exist. Genocide. They automatically put up these ridiculous barriers rather than listening to the people who it affects, the women, the girls, the parents who worry about their daughters being in spaces with men because of ridiculous policies. A lot of people still don't understand that when you have a policy that says identity determines whether you can enter into a certain space, that opens the door to any man, regardless of his intentions.
Yeah.
And are they athletes? Are they in there swimming as well?
No, they're not. That's the thing. They're not athletes, and I don't believe they're really doing any sports at all. It's just pure lounging around, hanging out in the locker room as a social space.
Okay. Now this gets super weird. So how are they allowed to get into the girls' locker room? Did they say, "Oh, I identify as a girl"?
Yeah, I guess at school it's just you gotta look like a girl and then identify as one, and that's what gets you in. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's not like we have teachers like making sure who goes or monitoring who's going in and whoever. But yeah, so they just walk right in. It's free to everyone.
That is bizarre.
This guy needs to understand what he is advocating for. You're not advocating for kindness. You're not advocating for inclusivity. You're not advocating for something that gives you the moral high ground. You are advocating for women to have their rights trampled upon. You are advocating for women and girls to be put in harm's way, to be put in dangerous situations that do happen. That's why women have had to go to court, all the way to the Supreme Court in the UK. And the Supreme Court here, we're still waiting. This is not a joke. This is not a matter of preference. It's the women being erased. It's the women being excluded from their own sports, from their own spaces. This guy needs to think about that.
But many of us do not want biological men in our spaces, our private single-sex spaces, and nor should we have to have them there just in order to satisfy other people's descriptions.
Right, well, I suppose we're going to have to agree to disagree then, Michelle. But
but we always have to agree to disagree, but it's not you that then has to get changed in front of a man.
Right, but
You would, because you're in that man's changing room, but you get what I mean. It's not you that has to then get naked and get changed and get undressed in front of someone of the opposite biological sex against your will. It's always us women that have to suck it up. Okay. And a lot of us, by the way, are fed up of it, quite frankly.
Huge well done to Michelle there. She handled that brilliantly, and that's the way to do it. Because these people need to be set straight. They need to be snapped out of their delusion. They really do. They need to be brought back to reality. And she did a great job there. So an update on one of the cases regarding nurses who have had to fight this whole insanity. Jennifer Millay, for those of you who still aren't aware, she has had a huge victory in court. She did receive a payout, and rightly so. She was suspended from her job as a nurse, which she absolutely loves and has dedicated her life to doing. She was suspended. An NHS trust has settled with a nurse who was disciplined for calling a transgender PDF file prisoner Mr. Jennifer Millay, 41, was suspended and threatened with dismissal after she referred to an inmate from a high-security men's prison who was listed as male on his medical record as Mr. and he. Miss Millay, a Christian nurse from South London, had been set to bring an employment tribunal against Epsom and St Helier University Hospital. But both the parties have settled. So I'm assuming the amount is undisclosed, but she has returned to work, thankfully. She said, "I cannot discuss the terms of the settlement, but generally I am glad that my employer has finally decided to extend an olive branch to me. I look forward to being able to focus on the job I love, instead of defending myself against various bizarre accusations. It should never have come to this. No nurse or other medical professionals should have to face what I have faced simply for telling the truth, doing their job and reporting racist abuse and physical threats from a patient." So the PDF file inmate called Miss Millay the N-word 3 times during a tirade at the hospital. And then we had the Darlington nurses who simply wanted their own changing room free of men. They had a successful tribunal case. In their case, the tribunal accepted the evidence of Professor Joe Phoenix that women are more likely to experience fear, distress, or humiliation by having to change in front of a member of the opposite sex than men are. Part of the judgment said, "We accept, as does the respondent, that women are more likely to have experienced sex-based harassment and sex-based violence than men. It will come as no surprise to anyone that this is so. The risk posed to women generally by the state of affairs causes a reaction in many women and leads them to adjust their own behaviour according to the circumstances." So this is real. It's not made up. It's not scenarios. It has happened. And the courts have agreed that this is a real situation. And this is something that women are dealing with on a regular basis, both in the UK, in the US, all over, Canada, Australia. It's an absolute nightmare, not just for women, but for little girls as well. It's women who have been discriminated against while people advocate for certain men to have privileges. It's women who have been erased, with doctors even refusing to acknowledge the definition of a woman, the biological definition of a woman. So let me know what you think of that debate. How do you think Michelle did? And where does this mentality come from where people just repeat mantras and expect everybody else to go along with it? So thanks for watching.